Welcome to Gazali. Today we have with us a very important curator, Sabitha Satchi. She is here in Goa, where she has curated an exhibition called Posthumous Dialogues with Francis Newton Souza at Museum of Goa. This is an exhibition which attempts to bring Souza back home to his village Saligaon. Sabitha Satchi is a poet of repute. Recently, she published her first collection of poems, which is called Hereafter, published by Poetry-Wala, and she is also published by Penguins. She has been a teacher in Delhi University, teaching English literature. She has been associated with Museum of Goa and with me for the last 18 years. She is one of the very few people from literature who are absolutely at ease with visual arts, have deep knowledge of art history. I would credit her with giving a kind of an academic foundation to the work I have been doing, because I have been talking to her for the last 18 years and we have been brainstorming about many different things. And then just 2 years ago, we were with Ashok Vajpayee and of the Raza Foundation, and we talked about the friendship between Souza and Raza. And then Sabitha came up with a very interesting idea. Let us hear from her about this exhibition, Posthumous Dialogues with Francis Newton Souza, which was inaugurated on 23rd and it is on until the 30th of May at Museum of Goa. So Sabitha, welcome to Gazali. Please let us know how this idea of creating this exhibition came.
You remember, of course, that we were sitting with Ashok Vajpayee, and he told us that Raza's centenary celebrations are going to be on for a year or two. They're going to run on for a year or two. And you were there, and who's the greatest Goan artist ever so far? It is Francis Newton Souza, right? So therefore, actually, I proposed the idea that we do an exhibition in honor, in homage to Francis Newton Souza.
And the name you selected for it actually immediately made it happen. Posthumous Dialogues with Francis Newton Souza. So now, please tell us, where would you place Francis Newton Souza in the perspective of the Indian visual art scene? Because you said that he is one of the greatest artists India has produced and definitely the greatest Goa has produced. So please talk about his place in Indian art history.
He is the founder of the Bombay Progressive Artist Movement. And he's actually, I would really think of him as possibly one of the 5 or 10 greatest Indian artists, modernist artists in particular. So what does actually Souza do? This is the 1940s, right? 1940s, independence movement is going on. And there is a group of artists in Bombay.
And not just independence movement, but it is also a time of turmoil all over the world.
Complete turmoil.
All over the world, the Second World War and everything. So this is the situation where Souza is there.
Yes, that is the global context in which, the Bombay Progressive Group actually comes together. So who does it actually include? These artists are all friends, very, very close friends. Who are they? S.H. Raza, F.N. Souza, Gaitonde, Hussain, Bakre, Tayyib Mehta joins later.
Ara,
Gade, Akbar Padamsi. So the Bombay Progressive Group of artists who actually introduced a certain kind of Western modernism in Indian art, they were active from 1940s to 1980s. So it's actually a movement that lasts a good 40 years.
I was talking to Raza, and I never met Souza, unfortunately, but I was talking to Raza, and what impressed me most during this conversation was in 40s and in 47, when India became independent, they had taken upon their shoulders the burden or the job of giving a direction to Indian contemporary art. So they said, we have to give a direction now. Now, what were the different directions which were prevailing at that time? There were many points of views.
Yes, in fact, there were already 2 schools which were active from more or less from the 1940s onwards. 30s, actually, the Shantiniketan school with Abanindranath Tagore and, Vinod Bihari Mukherjee. So there is the Shantiniketan school of Indian art already happening at this time. But Shantiniketan school actually looks east for inspiration because it was a very nationalist movement, right? I mean, they wanted to make Indian art more Eastern. They wanted to take a contemporary direction. However, with inspiration from Japan and Indonesia and, Eastern art, the Bombay group of artists instead looked west for inspiration. So what is happening in the West at this time? Of course, Picasso is active. And the entire Western modernism is flowering actually. And these group of artists are actually inspired by, not only inspired by, but what is fascinating is that they thought to take Indian contemporary art already in an international direction. So they had you remember Tagore's essay, right? What is called Indian art, in which he writes about, how nationalism is fine. Of course, it's needed for the independence movement. However, we also need international solidarity. So these artists already were taking, art in that direction of a global perspective. They already knew they were international artists.
So it is Souza and the progressive artist group which sort of internationalized Indian contemporary art, visual art. Now, please talk to us a little bit about the background of Souza. He was born half a kilometer from here, and I have every intention to persuade the government and especially the Panchayat to name this road after him. The road which leads from Saligaon Circle to the Museum of Goa. But he was born half a kilometer here. So please tell us a little bit about his biography, early biography.
Yeah, I do hope that road is actually named after him because, Souza, of course, needs his own road, actually. And Souza, of course, is born here in Saligaon in Goa. And when he's just 2 months old, his father dies. He's brought up entirely by his mother, single-handedly, who's a dressmaker. So he has a very poor childhood. He goes to primary school here in Goa, and then they both move to Bombay. He goes to school there, and he studies art in JJ School of Art in Bombay.
And he's expelled from St. Xavier's College.
He's expelled school, yes. So St. Xavier's School, he gets expelled because he drew nude portraits on the toilet walls of the school. And JJ School of Art also he gets expelled. This time for participating in the Quit India movement, 1946. Is when...
So he's very political. He had also joined the Communist Party.
Yes, in 1947 actually he joins the Communist Party, yeah.
But I think those nude portraits in the toilet, he has another explanation. He says, I was only correcting the wrong ones. They were drawn badly and I was drawing them correctly. So then, so he's expelled from JJ School of Art. And then what does he do?
Well, he goes to study art at JJ School of Art. From where I just said that he also got expelled from there, and then he goes to Oxford.
Yeah.
He gets a scholarship. They're very poor. He can't afford, they can't afford to pay for his education, but he's so good that he gets a scholarship to Oxford. But what does he go there to study? He goes there to study literature. He's also a poet and a writer. So he's actually studying in the English department in Oxford. And Stephen Spender, one of the greatest modernist poets of England at the time, and also a great art connoisseur, another such person who has both poetry and art together. So Stephen Spender discovers Souza's both his writing as well as his art, and introduces him to like major galleries there, So and then he gets his first break. He gets the show, right? He gets yeah.
So he basically comes into prominence in England. Not because of his painting, but because of his writing.
Both.
But initially because of writing. Stephen Spender recognizes that one essay. Please tell us a little bit about essay.
Okay, that essay, it's a fantastic essay. The title is Nirvana of a Maggot. A maggot, of course, is a bug, right? Is an insect. Nirvana of a Maggot, in which actually he writes about his own vision for art, and he also draws. So it's actually an essay with drawings, line drawings, and he's writing about his own vision of art, himself as an artist, and what he thinks art ought to be doing. And he writes very clearly there that the artist has a responsibility to engage with the world and to translate the suffering of himself or herself, as well as the suffering of the world, into painting. So that's the gist of the essay, actually. And he also calls himself a genius and somebody who's misunderstood and, all of that. Yeah.
he was definitely recognized even when he was in Mumbai in 1947 or 48.
Yes. In fact, by fellow artists, definitely he already was.
Fellow artist, and one of the most interesting criticism which appeared in Times of India at that time, I can't forget that, the art critic, I'm forgetting his name, not Langheimer, but I think somebody else, he says that now India does not have to look back at the glory of the artists from the past. Here we can look forward to Francis Newton Souza, and he will give a kind of a new direction to Indian art, which he did. And also when Picasso died, Souza himself has a nice statement to make. He says, now I'm the greatest. So now, since I mentioned Picasso, you organize a very interesting program at Museum of Goa where there was a reading of letters between Raza and Souza. Now, here is Souza in London now, and he's writing to his fellow artist in India. Please tell us a few interesting aspects of these letters, because these letters are very interesting.
These are actually letters from the Raza archives. Raza had the sense to keep the letters, right? So only the letters between these artists, the Bombay Progressive Group. So there's M.F. Hussain writing, there is Raza writing, and there's Souza writing. Now these letters are letters written to Raza. So those are there in the Raza archive. Therefore, Raza's own letters there are only 2 of them, But Raza had the sense to keep the letters, which is amazing that they already thought of themselves as potentially, creating something very new.
Yeah.
Now, what is very interesting about those letters is particularly from Souza to Raza, you see a whole range of things in those letters. You see them talking about their private lives, the need for money, poverty.
Birth of the child.
Birth of the child. They congratulate each other on the birth of the child. They also, of course, write a lot about art. And Souza in particular. So Souza is in London. And he is excited for the first time to see Picasso in the original. Right? And so he sees Picasso in the original, writes to so these letters are actually written collectively. Right? So it used to cost a lot of money, airmail. So they couldn't afford to send individual letters. And he had to write in tiny, tiny hand to fill all the, pages of the postcard, basically. And so he writes actually after seeing Picasso in the original for the first time. He writes to all of them. He says, my dear Raza, my dear Akbar, my dear Hussain, we should stop painting now. Why? Because Picasso has done everything. So he says to each of them, he says, Hussain, you stop painting because Picasso has already done it.
Without seeing what you are doing.
Without seeing what you're doing, Picasso has already done it. And then he says to, he also says to Bakre, you should stop making your work because Picasso has already done it. And he says about himself, I should just stop everything. I should just stop painting. I can't do anything because Picasso has already done it. So there is actually some self-doubt.
Yeah.
There's great excitement. He says Picasso is the greatest artist that the world has ever seen. And he has worked in all the mediums, right? Picasso himself, of course, is a painter, sculptor. He has done work in clay. He has done work on porcelain. He has done installations. He has done collages. He has done everything that was possible in art, all experiments. So he says there is nothing left for us to do. Now what do we do,
Since we started with the letters by Souza, speak to us a little bit about his writings. Apart from the Nirvana of the Maggot, he also wrote many other things.
Yes, some of them, he used to regularly write for the Illustrated Weekly of India. Pritish Nandi was the editor at that time. So he used to write on art or publish essays, which not necessarily about art, It could be political essays, it could be essays on literature. So he actually wrote essays as well as poetry, of course. He was continuing to write poetry all through. But mainly essays. He's a great essayist. His language is poetic. But also he's actually a little aggressive also in his writing.
Yeah.
Because he says, he'll review, let's say, some show happening in Bombay. And he'll say, well, all this is rubbish, this painter should actually now stop painting or whatever.
Yeah, he has not very strong comments against so many things, so many artists. This is all nonsense what they're doing. So even the contemporary ones, yeah. So now Souza is having his first exhibition in London. What were the paintings? Please speak to us about his paintings he was doing this time.
At this time, he's just moved to London, right? And 1940s, he had already started painting landscapes.
Yeah.
Right, so 1940s, Sunaparat actually also had an exhibition of those originals.
Yeah.
1940s Goan landscapes.
Yeah.
And he paints those while he's in Goa and also from memory when he's in Bombay as well as when he's in London.
Goa remains with him even in London.
Very much. So, so he's actually making landscapes of what he's seeing also in London. And these are not realist landscapes, as you know, these are cubist style kind of landscapes. And he, in all those landscapes, even the ones he does from London, you see Goa, you see the architecture of Goa, you see the fields, you see coconut trees, right? So he's sitting in London feeling very nostalgic for Goa, and he writes about how he misses Goan food. He asks people to please bring me a packet of masala, please bring me a packet of pickle from Goa when you come, so he's missing Goa all through the time that he's in London actually.
Yeah. Well, he is, I think, an artist who was ahead of his time. He painted female nudes, male nudes. He made portraits. Let us start with actually his nudes, because when he started doing that, people were not ready to accept. India was not ready for him in 1947, and perhaps India is not ready for him even today. Especially with the right wing taking over the art scene, there is a huge problem with nudity. So Souza and his nudes, please speak about that.
Yeah, so Souza, first of all, Souza comes to the nudes. He starts painting portraits already while in London, right? And and these are portraits of both males and females. Sometimes they're only the head, sometimes it's just the face, sometimes it's the torso. And the nude series is actually start happening. And the female nudes, which a lot of people, this is my take on it as an art historian, that people have misunderstood Souza's female nudes. They are, of course, very bold. They are provocative. The private parts are on display, etc. And they're frontal, right? So there is, of course, very provocative nudity for sure. However, what you see in those female figures is they're not airbrushed like, models for TV or whatever. They're not airbrushed. They're real women. They're black often. And they have very rounded bodies, and they don't have necessarily beautiful bodies. And they are, so he actually Indianizes the nude, right? There are already, of course, nudes that Western painting has, obviously for centuries. In many of which actually the woman is lying down and inviting the man sort of pose, right?
So the women in most Western paintings were objects for males to look at.
Yes.
But here, Souza's women are powerful women. They engage you. They are actually
They're challenging you, actually.
You.
Yeah. They challenge you to look at them, and it's frontal. So it's they're not lying in a pose which which is kind of erotically inviting. They are standing there, powerfully, like a Devi figure, like a Shakti figure. Yeah. So I really feel that, which is actually where it becomes very interesting to talk about Souza's style, because it's, he does bring the curvature of our temple sculptures into his nude drawings. I don't know why India has a problem with nudity, because our temples are full of nude sculptures, right? So, so Souza actually brings that kind of roundedness, that sacredness of the female form, and that power of the female form, right? Hussain does that a little later. Female portraits done actually in the style of temple architecture, or
And many of his female nudes, they're of course erotic, many of them, but there is also a connection with his mother.
Yes.
So please speak to us about his connection with his mother.
Subodh, actually, it's not just in the female nudes that the connection with the mother is an Oedipal sort of connection. His supposedly most important work, but also actually a fabulously important work called Birth.
Yeah.
It shows a woman lying down, a pregnant woman lying down, and there is a man looking at her. There is a Goan landscape in the background. Right, but she's nude. She's absolutely, and she's lying straight, full belly.
Yeah.
And there is a man looking at her. That is the painting called Birth. And Souza's connection with his mother, so he's actually kind of celebrating the woman's fertility, the birth canal, you know, so his nudes are actually
Like the mother goddess.
yeah, as the mother goddess or something like that.
We don't have too much of time, so I think another most important series of work he did is connected with Christianity. Souza himself was not very pious.
Not at all.
Not at all. But yet, there are hundreds of works which are done, which are even portraits of Christ and based on the biblical scenes. So, how do you place them?
Yeah, I will actually, you know, I will connect this to your previous question, the mother question. So he actually paints a lot of you know, baby Jesus with Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
Right? So his own relationship with his mother was very intimate. And there is actually, you know, that female, again, the female as a sacred entity comes from that close relationship with his mother, right? And his Christian paintings, he has a large number of paintings, Last Supper, Crucifixion, you know, Christ sitting with saints, his disciples. So Christianity, Souza was expelled from the church.
Yeah.
He is a fallen Catholic, but he grew up going to the church, right? He was taken to the church. When he became an adult, he gave up religion. You know, he probably never had religion actually. But and he's actually expelled from the church.
That's what he writes. He was baptized here, and I'm told there might be a photograph of Souza in the group photograph in the church in Saligaon. And but he talks about the church very beautifully. He says he was not interested in what the priest was speaking, but he was interested in the grandeur of the church, the architecture, and that's what he paints too, and also the objects.
That's very true actually. His architectural works, you know, the Goan landscapes always have that kind of the Goan church, and also of course he sees the Portuguese art which is inside those churches in Goa Vela. So you know, so he is engaging closely with Christian art that he sees growing up in here, and also when he goes west, a lot of art exists in churches like the Vatican.
Yeah.
The Vatican has Michelangelo, the Vatican has Raphael. You know, so
He made a very interesting statement where the Souza looks at himself as Christ. The Christ is an activist, a radical, and Souza himself is an activist and a radical.
yes, that's a thank you for asking that question, because it's probably something that needs to be actually talked about and written about. Souza and Christ. You know, Souza imagines himself as Christ, as the martyr, as the victim, and also as the radical activist who was misunderstood in his time, like Christ was. So obviously Christ was misunderstood by the state, crucified for being the activist he was. And Souza thinks that, you know, he too is a misunderstood activist and genius and all of that, and, you know, here I am, not even making money for my paintings, even though after his death, they sell for millions of dollars.
35 crores is what the last painting got sold in.
$4.5 million, yes, yeah.
So you made a very interesting statement, which I really loved. You said that everything Souza painted are his self-portraits. So they are almost autobiographical. His own character sort of jumps out of the paintings he created.
Yes, and this actually is probably a very bold claim to make. So I make that claim as an art historian who studied Souza's work very deeply, that I see aspects of him, aspects of Souza in almost all his portraits. The male portraits of other people, female portraits, the female nudes. You see his libidinal energy, his creative energy, you know, and Christ. He is the martyr. Souza also is the martyr, you know, so he identifies with all that. He identifies with the creative energy of the woman. He identifies with the martyrdom and suffering of Christ. And you see elements of Souza's, let's say, you know, a bit of his beard or something will come in male portraits, you know, so a lot of portraiture, therefore, of Souza is actually self-portrait.
They're full of it's the anxiety, the anguish comes out. Well, I must thank you for curating this exhibition, the Posthumous Dialogues with
My pleasure.
Souza. I think the greatest artist Goa has produced is not celebrated enough in Goa. The church, in a way, more or less abandoned him. His funeral was attended by hardly anybody. And I have created a sculpture of Souza in response to Souza. And we took it to the seminary, to the cemetery in Saligaon. I think Souza needs to be celebrated, and people in Goa especially must know more about the great artists that we created. There's another great artist Goa has created.
Gaitonde.
V.S.
We
Gaitonde.
are already planning something about Gaitonde.
So what are your, first let's talk about what are your plans for this Posthumous Dialogues with Francis Newton Souza, because you want to continue this.
Yes, so this is a project. In fact, when I started curating this, it took me 2 years to plan. To plan in terms of not just conceptualization, selection of artists, the kind of work that we would invite in honor of Souza. So it took me 2 years to put the whole thing together, and it's going to take another 2. It is going to carry on for another 2 years. I call this actually the Posthumous Dialogues with Souza project.
Okay.
Right. So, and the exhibition is the start of it.
I think 2024 is the centenary year of Francis Newton Souza. It would have been 100. He was born in 1924. So I think we must have really a great celebration for Souza in Goa, and hopefully a road is named after. And then I really wish that you continue this project with another Goan artist, Posthumous Dialogues with V.S. Gaitonde.
Yeah, we have already spoken about that.
Thank you very much for this great exhibition. I think more and more people should.
And thank you, Subodh. Actually, I mean, this fantastic space, fantastic opportunity, and thank you for.
And we must
putting
thank
this, and of course Ashok Vajpayee and Raza
Foundation. Because once Raza even mentioned to me that I asked him, have you been to Goa? And he said, yes, I remember, I came with Newton.
Yes, yeah. So Ashok Vajpayee actually knew Newton, Francis Newton Souza, in New York. He's actually visited him in a tiny little apartment which was stacked with canvases even inside the toilet.
So let's bring Souza back home and let Goa celebrate Souza.
Yes, I hope the road is actually named, and we will continue celebrating him for some time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Subodh.
Thank you.
Thank you.